Okay, so in the previous session particularly already we discussed about all those standby options, how they work and all that scale out scenarios. Before session, shown you how we can configure system replication, which can be used for two situations: one disaster recovery, and another one is zero downtime maintenance. So there we have seen how to configure that active scenario where the secondary site is also accessible to you, which can use it for testing purpose. You are not allowed to do manipulations, but you can just access it for testing purposes. So that flexibility we have there. But there are a couple of parameters which I want to explain you there. Will be really helpful for you. So look at that. One is we have something called replication mode. Replication mode is basically for controlling that commit phase of your transaction. Nothing else. It's a simple concept. Controlling the commit phase of the transactions. So if you remember, there were three options: synchronous, asynchronous, and synchronous in memory. Usually, depending on whether you are going with the metro clusters or geo clusters, we decide on this. Like if you are going with the metro clusters which are less than 50 to 100 kilometers away, we go with synchronous. Whereas if it's geo cluster, far away places you have, then we usually go with asynchronous, because that will have impact on the transactions performed in the primary system. Now try to understand this. So suppose you go with the synchronous option. Say end user is performing a transaction in the primary database. We know the concept behind the transactions in on a database, which I explained you clearly in log backups when we discussed about log backups. We clearly discussed on that. First of all, whenever a transaction is performed, the data will be written into the log buffer, and then that will be written into the log segment of your log volumes. So that's what happens. So now when you do a transaction in the primary and you have a secondary system, configured system replication, then what happens is first data will be written into the log buffer of the primary, then into the log segment of the primary. Because system replication is configured, this data will be sent to the secondary. But when it's sent to the secondary, in the secondary first it will be written into the memory, that is log buffer, and then it will be written into the log segment of the secondary, the disk, and then you'll get an acknowledgement from the secondary. So then only your transaction is completed in the primary. So when you go with the synchronous option, this user has to wait for a long time, almost double the time it will take when system replication is configured. Suppose earlier is doing the transaction in 1 second, now it will take 2 seconds. Maybe even more, depending on that network communication we have between the primary and secondary systems. So to cut down the time, they have this synchronous in memory. So what happens in that particular case is synchronous in memory. So in the primary, as usual, data will be written into the buffer and then into the log segment. Data will be sent to the secondary. And in the secondary, once data is written into the log buffer, then immediately acknowledgement comes from the secondary system and your transaction is completed here. Meaning now that it is not waiting until the data is written into the log segment of the secondary. So that time you are saving. So that's how your performance definitely, transaction performance definitely improves comparatively, comparing with synchronous option. Whereas in the next one, asynchronous, it's all about only primary system. The primary system data will be written into the buffer, then into the log segment, and data will be sent to the secondary. That's it, your transaction completed in the primary. So system doesn't wait for any acknowledgement to come from the secondary. So even if in case if you lose the data in between because of the network issues and all that, so there's a possibility like that. I mean, it's not exactly is going to happen, but there's a possibility. So that's why usual recommendation is this: if you go with metro clusters, you go with synchronous. Geo clusters go with asynchronous. Metro clusters decision is yours whether you want to go with synchronous on disk or synchronous in memory. There's a slight difference there, but depending on the performance of your transactions, definitely you can take a call on. No rules there, but preferably you go with synchronous there. So whereas when we go with the other one called operation modes basically will decide the takeover time. So if you go with the log replay, the takeover time is very, very less. If you go with the delta data shipping, takeover times will be more. Delta data shipping is old concept. So from SPS 11 onwards, SAP has introduced log replay. And that too, now 2.0, we have seen log replay with read access active concept. So we use it in log replay if it's a metro cluster, geo clusters, you can think about delta data shipping also. Where you want to have shorter takeover times, you go with log replays. That's what you have, those options there. Okay, so that's what we have in that DR configurations. So it's better you do it by using HANA Cockpit 2.0. You can do it by using Studio also. There's nothing wrong in that. But you do it by using Studio, that option is not available as of now. But once Studio is properly enhanced, you will get those options there also. That is log replay with read access, which I've shown you other day. Okay, so that's the concept of high availabilities and all that. Scale out high availabilities. Okay, let us get into the next topic. The next topic for discussion here is the transports, how the transportations are performed. Actually, when you're running applications, you don't need to worry about transports here. And that's not our interest. Like suppose earlier you're running ERP on Oracle database. Now you're running that ERP on HANA. So as far as transportation is concerned, both are same. Whatever the transportation mechanism used to follow earlier, same transportations you can follow even now, because all your developments are taking place at application level, at the DRP application level. Similarly, the case with the BW, CRM, all this. But we know that there is an option for you to do some development activities at the HANA database level. HANA database level development activities you can do. We know that. I have shown you already. They build some data models and all that. So in case if they build data models at a HANA database level, then how do you do those transportations? How is it possible to perform transportation at the database level? So that's a concept now. See, in the older versions at the beginning, until SPS 06, we used to rely on something called export import. But SPS 7 onwards, SAP came up with something called native HANA transport, which is more effective and better way of doing transportations at the database level. Anyhow, I'll show you first of all how to perform export import concept, and then we'll see the native HANA transport also. Both examples I'll show you. So suppose you have dev system, test quality system, and then production system like that. And we know that modeling consultants, they develop models onto this content, which we also call them as repository objects. And they do all those developments in the development system. Now requirement is those objects created under content, nothing but repository objects, need to be transported to test system, from there to production system. But before doing this transportation of these content objects, a very important thing is, see, they build these models based on some tables. Look at this. Based on the tables like this. So what you need to do is, before doing this transportation, making sure that these tables are available in all the databases, all three databases, dev, test, and production. Dev, anyhow, you have them. That's why we are creating models. Test system, production system also, they should have the same tables. Otherwise, if you do transportation of these objects, suppose this analytic view, if I'm transporting in the target system, you end up with an error. When the table is not available, this object is not valid. So you know that basically all these tables are not created once, these are all replicated from the source systems. So the way they did replications to dev system, same way they replicate to test system and production system also. The same way, the same procedure. So, but maybe suppose in case they are using something like SLT and all that, tables may be same, but they may be available in different schemas. In development system, one schema; test system, one schema; production system, one schema, like that. In such cases, in case the same table is available in a different schema in the target database, then you need to perform something called schema mapping. Schema mapping. So this schema mapping always need to be performed in the target database. So there, when you do schema mapping, you specify your source schema name and target schema name. So where do you perform that? When you are in the modeler perspective, if you go to quick view, here you find schema mapping. If you click on that, you select your target database. So here you need to specify authoring schema is nothing but schema in the source. Authoring schema is nothing but schema in the source, whereas physical schema is nothing but schema in the target. Like that. So once you do that, even if your same table is available in a different schema in the target database, still it works. System will recognize that automatically. So that's one thing which is needed. So other than that, making sure the tables are available. Otherwise, this concept doesn't work. Okay, so when they want to perform these objects, content objects, transportation, as I told you, export import is one of the option. So let us see how they do it. Export import, one of the option you have is, in export import also there are different modes available. One of the mode we call it as developer mode. Another one is delivery unit mode. So I'll show you these two examples, these two options. So first of all, let us see what is the developer mode is all about. As the name itself is suggesting, the developer mode, it's done by developers. So in the developer mode, they have that flexibility of selecting individual objects for transportation. You can choose individual objects for transportation. So why the developers will do is, generally when you're speaking about transporting individual objects, you can't expect administrator doing that. Say example, one analytic view need to be transported. Internally, that analytic view is using multiple attribute views. He doesn't know that. Administrator doesn't know. So that lead to a lot of issues there. That's what we call it as dependency issues. So that will be handled by the developers very easily because they are the ones who are developing those objects. That's why. So let us see if they want to do it, how they do it, the developer mode. Just a minute. First of all, from the source database, whichever the source database you have, where you have all these objects are developed, go to that source database. Here, this I am considering RH1 as a source. Let us consider this an example. Now go to the menu, file, you have an option export. From the source, always you need to export, and to the target you need to import. So here under SAP HANA content you have developer mode. Select the developer mode, click on next, select your source database, next, select the objects for export, whatever it is. Specify the export location. Remember, as this is done by developers, they will be able to do it only to their client workstation. So in their client workstation, any path they can give this folder, target folder. Example, on the desktop, I'm creating a new folder. Just giving like this. Finish. That exporting is completed, so export it to the folder in the client workstation. Now that you can import into the target database on the database. Perfect. So into the target database will import. Let me check any other database running here. To R30. So the way you exported, same way you can do the importing also. TGB pre. Okay, see this one. I'll just consider this R33 as target. Let's go to File, Import, Developer Mode, Target Database you select. Browse that local folder where you have that content exported, but observe when we are selecting that folder, you need to choose that SID of the source, that folder. That's important. And then select the objects which you want to import. Add, finish. But as I told you, now R33, you can see that this is the package, this is the object, but it's not activated. The reason why it's not activated, I mean, developer mode, it won't do activations. We have to do manual activations. But as I mentioned, whenever you want to do the activation, you need to have respective tables here. Otherwise, it will throw error. So I have some sample tables exported earlier, which I'm using now. Let me get those tables. They all need to be replicated, otherwise you'll get errors. But you should have those tables and with required privileges in the target. Then only activation can be done. This concept of security already explained you, if you remember. Why you need these additional privileges. So once you have those privileges along with the tables, you can activate this. This is done by modelers. So that's now active object. So this is how we can do transportation of the individual objects in the developer mode. And this is done only in exceptional cases. This won't happen regularly. This happens only in exceptional cases. Regularly, when you want to do transportations earlier, we used to follow another mode called delivery unit mode. So what we do in the delivery unit mode is, which generally we as administrators follow that. First of all, we create a delivery unit. And then we assign the packages to the delivery unit. No individual object selection here, not possible. No possibility of selecting individual objects. Compulsory, we need to assign the packages only. So if you assign a package, all the objects under that package will be assigned to the delivery unit. Like these multiple packages you can assign, which are all related. And at a time we'll export the delivery unit. So as all the related objects are there in the delivery unit, you won't have the dependency errors and all that. So let us see how that is done. Okay, for delivery units creation, a small setting you need to do, go to configuration. This is in the source system. There is a parameter here. Excuse me. Called content vendor. This one. Default you have it undefined. Give some vendor name like this. Without content vendor, you can't create a delivery unit, not possible. Once that is done, when you are in the developer mode, go to window, show view, quick view. So here the very first option we have is delivery units. Select the source database. So you can see already there are some delivery units which comes default with your installation. Create and give some name, delivery unit name. Anything you can give, say the unit 1. And who is the responsible person. Versions and all that not needed, optional things. Version support packages and all. And then here we need to assign the packages. Click on add and assign the packages. It's not about one object, the entire package will be assigned, including sub packages. You can assign as many packages as you want. Like this. And finish. So now we'll export the entire delivery unit itself. So click on export. Select delivery unit. Select source database. And here select the delivery unit which we have created now. Any alias names you want to give, you can give. Generally, delivery unit names will be technical names. So you want to give any alias names, business terminology, you can use it. It is showing list of packages that you cannot change. It will just show you these are the packages which are being exported using this delivery unit. And filter by time option is there. This is only when, as I told you earlier, we used to rely on these delivery units only completely for transportation. Suppose if you transport today and after 1 week again you want to transport, you need to select only the new objects. So there is no proper change management at that time. So we used to rely on this completely, specifying that from date to date. So only within the time period, whatever the objects were developed, only those objects will be selected. Then choose export location, export to server or client. I'm choosing client. Server means Linux machine. So browse some location, and your entire delivery unit will be exported in the form of one single file with extension TCZ. That file name you can change, but file extension is same. Next, finish. So that TCZ file looks like a zip file, a RAR file. So now we need to import into the target. So click on import, select delivery unit. Next, select the target database where you have the file we exported to the client only. Browse and select that file. This is the file. Open. There are few objects, very few objects. Actually, in those packages, there is nothing much. So earlier in the developer mode, we manually need to activate, but here automatic activation will be done. If objects are already there, they will be overwritten, replaced. Not checking this, finish. Now you'll get all those objects into the target. Like this. So this was the concept earlier, export import. But change management is very difficult in this, right? You can't handle the change management at all. Practically impossible. You don't know who has done what changes they did, how do you transport the changes, all that unknown here. That's why to avoid all those issues, SAP came up with the native HANA transport, which is the best option, and it's having the right change management. You can identify objects developed by whom and handle that lifecycle management also very easily. That's why actually this they have included in lifecycle management. Part of your application lifecycle management, we have a transportation management at database level. Okay, so we'll see that practically. I mean, the concept, if you want to practically implement we need to do some configuration settings, and if you want to do those configuration settings, exclusive permissions you need, privileges also matters there. So all that I'll show you. Anyhow, this 10 minutes is not sufficient for that. Please will take half an hour to 40 minutes to configure that, and we'll see how we can create transport route, change list, transporting the objects, and how effective that is compared to this export import. That you can easily realize that. So export import you just consider as one of the just option which we used to use earlier but not now. But in exceptional cases, in case if needed, the developer mode, sometimes for individual objects they use it. That's the only thing you need to know.